Namaste everyone. So a warm welcome to today's Yes Talk on the topic Discovering the Core of the Child. So today we have a guest speaker with us who is Arul Dev. I really thank Arul for coming here with us. I'll share few words about Arul as an introduction. So Arul is the founder of Coaching with Depth Basic Level 1 and Level 2 program. He is also founder, CEO of People First Consultants, which is in the field of talent hiring, coaching, well-being, and leadership development for 27 years. And his single quest for all these 27 years is to discover the inner practice, to discover clarity of life, purpose, and work. Arul has authored 2 books, Into Great Depths of Your Being and The Flame Within. And across all his works, he coaches and guides people with practices to support their inner evolution and outer creative manifestation. Once again, Arul, a warm welcome today evening on the Yes Talk.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you, Ramesh. So I begin. Amit, go ahead.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. Yeah. So this topic is a very interesting topic. How do you discover the core of a child? And I'm going to share my observations, my explorations, and my experiments. And I was suggesting that instead of this being a monologue, at any point of time, feel free to put a question on a chat or unmute yourself. So that actually we can plunge into this topic. It's rather an important topic, not only for parents, for teachers, for even anybody who's interacting, with a child, or for that matter, any other human being. So when we speak about things, of spirituality, when we speak about things like a soul, many a time these sound good, when we are reading about it. But how do you put it into practice? So there is, let's say, there's a child who's growing up in your house, or you're part of a school where the child is growing up. In the beginning, it's like, let's say 0 to 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, or whatever. It's rather the growing up period of the child. And you can't, for example, too much distinguish, but you can actually. But when the child, let us say, crosses a 7, 8, or 9 years of age, there is this term called individuation, which is a term in psychology, which, for example, for me, as in my part of growing up phase, I went through it only post my college. It was then when I started asking questions like, why am I okay? So I went to BITS, supposedly a great college, but then, why should I now go to the US, which everybody is going, and it doesn't seem to truly resonate at a deeper level. So while, I was studying in BITS, and there was a whole bunch of charm about going to the US at that point of time, and everybody was jumping into software at that point of time. While the attraction was still there, the desire was there, the peer herd mentality was still there. By that time, already I had touched a few books or attended a few workshops. So the deeper aspiration was beginning to form, and there was something different, that was operating on the inside, which started pointing out, saying that while these are all attractive, something is amiss. Okay, and people call this by different names, but I was forced to take notice of that, inner voice or something that was saying that, yeah, but this is not fitting in, to what I really wanted to do. So thus began my search. Okay, so when we go to this we'll address this topic in diverse ways, and feel free to come in at any point of time. So when we talk about the core of a child, it could refer to several things. It could refer to a connection the child is carrying. Okay. Now, I think it was a book by a Sufi saint called Hasrat Inayat Khan, if I remember right, which I was reading, where he actually maps the development of the child in different ages. And if I remember right, he was pointing out that the connection with the soul, the connection with the spiritual is intact. And then as the child starts growing up, the child loses it for various reasons. Okay. So one way of looking at the core is, what is the blessing that the child is carrying? Okay. So first of all, we have to go a little deeper on this topic, is that any human, be it a newborn child or an adult, like some of us, the human doesn't end from the head to toe. There is always some kind of a connection that is there. You could call it with a universal mind. You could call it with a deeper self. You could call it with something higher, something divine, all of that stuff. The connection is always there. Okay. So now, if you take the entire fabric as the human, not just what you see, but there is some kind of a connection. One way of looking at core is that, what is the gift that this child is bringing into the table? Okay. Another way of looking at the core could be, what are some gifts? What are some natural talents that a child is bringing in? Now, or you could call it soul, the soul characteristics, soul nature, deeper qualities, deeper resonance, etc., etc. Now, the problem with this is to detect it. Okay, so I have to detect it as a parent, or if I have to detect it as a teacher, I need to have done that exploration within myself, at least to some extent. Okay. Whereas, it's slightly changing right now, but there are a good majority of the humans who are interested in success, the material world. And if it comes to spirituality, it is taken as, let's say for the Christians, it's a Sunday morning mass, or for others, it's a reading of the Gita or a chant or a prayer. And one feels fulfilled somewhat. Okay, I'm working, I'm raising a family, there are one or two children coming up, we're trying to do our best, etc. And, I'm also spiritual, I also tick my box on these things, and I feel meaningful on that. But however, if you want to collapse this all together, not just leave it as compartments, that's when first the aspiration has to build, what is something that is unique inside me? When I say unique, it does not mean that it's not there in others. It just means that there is something deeper that is present as a quality or something. So first of all, there has to be an interest to start looking at what is it for ourselves. And then when at least we begin looking at it for ourselves, we start observing the child and understand that there is a surface and there is an inner. Or maybe I'll even put it like this: there is a surface, there is an inner, there is a core. Okay. The surface is what the child is saying or what you observe in the child. The inner is what is going on in the thought, feeling, emotion, etc. But there's always a core, something that is there. Now, many a time, you can detect this core from both something which you can call it as positive, or something that you could call it as limiting. In fact, sometimes it is easier to locate the core from a certain rebellion that is occurring in the child, or a problem that the child is coming up. Sometimes it is easier to take that track, because if you learn to look beneath it, you'll always be able to start detecting traces of the core. Same way can also be found through the aspect of resonance. What is it that the child is resonating to get a glimpse of this? Okay, but that is jumping too far ahead, and I'll go slow to build bridges to come to that point. So the first is that I am aspiring as a adult or a parent or a teacher, and I do these workshops for teachers, and immediately, almost immediately, they come up with a statement saying, how can we even do this in our classroom? There are 40 people, 50 people, 60 people. And nowadays in the education system, even your 5 minutes are accounted. You have to do it like this, you have to do it like this. How do you even do it? But the point is that, like if you read my profile, one way of looking at it is, oh, this guy is almost into everything. What's he really doing? Okay. So for me, I was always interested in a deeper quest, and I didn't want to do it in a monastic way. I did want to indulge with the basic aspects of life, and I thought through that it is easier to do all these deeper explorations, which is true in my case. So whether you're spending, whether there are 40 people in your classroom, or you're a parent with a single child, or there are two children that you have, first of all is the interest that either which case the core is going to shine out. It'll be either silently shining out, or it would have come forward to some extent, and then you can easily detect it is for sure going to shine out. It is that belief, that faith, or that aspiration which is the first starting point, because each one will have to develop a different grammar, a different way of looking at it. But first that interest, or first that knowledge or wisdom that there is something on the surface, there is something on the inner, and there is a core. And I do want to detect it for what? Would there be a practical, would the child get a better degree, or would the child get, a better employment or a better partner? Like we do sometimes these student courses, and sometimes, we get questions from parents. Will this help the child to score more marks? Okay. So now, while that is a practical aspect of life, as parents and teachers and adults, we're also responsible to touch something on the inner. It's like a two-way journey. If I touch something something at the soul level, I can detect it easier in the child or the person on the outside. The reverse is true. If I train myself to somewhat flip from the surface and connect deeper, then it makes my own journey easier as well. Okay. So I'll pause here for a second so that we're traveling together. Any questions, any thoughts so far? And then I'll share a few methods or ways that I have been doing this. But any thoughts so far? Do you agree, disagree? What are your comments, thoughts? Put it on the chat or unmute yourself. Okay.
Arul, is there a right age for individuation to develop, or would just vary from one person to another without much consequences?
In my observation over the years of working with different age groups and children, I'm finding that the age, the occurrence of individuation is coming ahead right now than, let's say, 20, 30 years back. So, for example, we used to run a program called Beyond Schooling, and I'm just kicking it back, from next week. We started observing that 6th standard, or sometimes the 5th standard, it is beginning. And the first sign, most of the time, is an aspect of rebellion. Unfortunately, which simply means that the child is experiencing that there is no possibility to just express it. Either there is a lack of understanding from the parents or extended family or whatsoever. So rebellion is one sign of individuation. But I have my own friends who I do remember as I was growing up. They were lucky enough to individuate without this rebellion because the parents were open, and they had some neighbors with whom they could connect to. So the answer is, I think, at 5th grade or 6th grade, it is beginning. It is very prominent in the 7th standard, 8th standard. But so far, I've been seeing a decline when the child enters the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. Okay. Now, I've been wondering why. Because the intensity of individuation, and then suddenly there is a backlash that has often been, I'm generalizing, but this is what I've been seeing as a pattern. And there are two reasons I've seen this occurring. A, they get caught up in so they're growing up, the sexuality opens up. There is an aspect that they want to present themselves well to another person and stuff like that. For some, addiction starts to build up at this point of time. A combination of these gets them to start focusing on how they present themselves so that, the opposite gender or their classmates or just the peer groups accept them. They become a little, so that there's a certain consciousness of their body, of their sexuality, and other things that are forming up, which seems to distract from that other deeper thing which does not have these flavors. So something at the core or the soul, it does not have the flavors of I want to be attractive, I want to be popular, and those things are not there in that. So that is one. Second is, I think, the overemphasis on maybe acads or whatsoever, the peer pressure maybe distracts them. But it is in that age group, I think currently, from whatever I've been, this is my data pre-lockdown. I was working extensively with students pre-lockdown. Post-lockdown has not been as much as before. So some of my programs are beginning, from next week onwards. So my data point is 3 years back. This is what I've been observing. Okay. Any other questions before I move forward? Okay. All right.
Yeah, no more questions.
Okay. All right. Now, how do you start detecting the core? How do you even start detecting the core? Now, first I want to differentiate something, and I'm sharing an incident that happened a few days back. I was talking to somebody known to me, and the person was going through a little bit of a crisis point. Person could be in 24, 25 years of age, and person was very conscious on the kind of work that the person wanted to do, life that the person wanted to lead, when the person wanted to get married, and all of that stuff. But there was pressure coming in from the near and dear in terms of the choice of partner or how one should live life. There was a heavy pressure coming in on that point. Now, some of the people when I meet, they are often not clear on what is the flavor of the deeper. They're often not clear. It's a very hazy thing, and I'll talk about how to make it clear. But in this case, the person was actually quite clear. Like one of the examples of the core of this person is, there was a huge power and a certain connection of inner anchoring that the person was already carrying without doing any yoga, without doing any practice. It was a given that the person had for some reason. Okay. So the person had a clarity, and the person was aware that behind the surface, there was something that was feeling like power, peace, a deeper connection, all that the person was aware. But while the person attempted to move forward, very close, the family networks were pushing to do something else. So the person got confused and, reached out and wanted to have a talk. And I started having a talk. The statement was, I think I'm selfish. I think I'm selfish. Okay. Because I want to lead my life in this particular manner. This is what I'm sensing in me. So I think that I should do this. This is what I would craft my life. However, my near and dear feel not comfortable with that. So if I follow what I'm going to do, I feel very selfish. Okay. Now, to me, that was a fundamental error in understanding, which is what I wanted to clarify. So, if you're responding merely to a certain preference or a certain desire that you have against what somebody has, you could term it as selfish. But something that comes as a necessity of the soul, something that comes from a deeper ask, it is not necessarily selfish, but it is like an inner home that we have to give to ourselves. See, the problem of the core is a seed. First of all, you have to detect what this seed is. Okay. But it is not mandatory. Like, you have a seed. If you know whether it is a mango seed or if you know if it is some other seed, in what soil you have to put it, what manure to add. There's a lot of knowledge about it, so it makes it easier. However, even if you don't know the seed, if you approximately do the right things, maybe it will flower. So there are two aspects. Everybody has a core. It is perhaps important to have some light about it, what exactly it is. But the second and even more important is there has to be an inner home provided, an inner ambience, which could be either given by self or it could be given by near and dear, or it could be even given through books. It can be given by guides unknown or known to us. Okay. But it is only in the presence of this inner ambience that the core is going to flower. So going back to this person, I told him that, hey, maybe I think this usage of the word selfish is confusing. If truly this is something that you're discovering on the inner and deeper, and you feel that it's not just about a certain preferentiality or a desire, but something that you're sensing about your true nature, quality, presence, then you need to honor it. Okay. Now, in my own classic example, as I was growing up post my college, it was then that I started discovering my core. Like my core in terms of how I wanted to work, my core in terms of the kind of person I wanted to get married to. So for me, I was interested in spirituality right from the beginning, but I give you one example. So just spirituality is not sharp enough. I discovered that for me, the universality element is very important. It's not following a particular dogma or a religion, which we would all do in some way, but it should have a universal appeal. So when the intuition started forming in me and I started discovering myself, I had this very clear clarity so I come from a Christian background. I had a very clear intuition that I will get married to somebody who's a Brahmin. And I did not have anybody as a girlfriend or anybody of that sort as a Brahmin, but I knew without doubt from inside. Okay, because there was something that was telling me that it is going to be a universal partnership. Now, that clarity was there on the inside. And from my house, it was all that the regular thing, you need to perhaps get married, same religion, etc., etc., etc. And for me, relationship with parents was important. So that was a need of the human emotion. The human emotion, the human part of me wanted to have a wonderful relationship with my parents. But because I want to have a wonderful relationship to my parents, something on my inside was not allowing me. Like at one point, I succumbed to it. I said, okay, let me see a list of, a few people whom you want to recommend that I should get married to. And I went on a long retreat of about 10 or 20 days. And I came back and I see some 4 profiles on my table. And I was pretty much shocked how they turned this whole thing around in 10 or 20 days. So I looked at it and I knew that they were all very interesting. The people were very accomplished, very good people. But inside told me if I do that, I'm going to regret it because I know from inside me that the partnership is different. So all this is part of the core in a way. It is your inner guidance coming and guiding you, saying that, okay, walk in this direction, build this quality, take this path. What is your nature? What is your preference? So I stood for that. And that is not selfish. The same example that I shared with the other gentleman. That is not selfish. That is an aspect of something deeper. You could call it soul or you could call it core. That has to be honored. Okay. So before we jump on what method and all that stuff, we need to be able to be very clear that honoring something from the soul or the core is not selfish. It is an important part of building up your inner ambience and inner space. Okay, any questions on this? Any comments, any questions, any doubts? Okay. So let me go to the practical aspects, and I'm going to share this with examples. How can you detect the core of somebody? How can you detect the core of somebody? Okay. Now, the problem first. The child is just going to simply absorb stuff from near and dear. It's not just a child, it is you and me as well. The fundamental problem which prevents us from going to the core or individuating is we are constantly absorbing each other's thoughts, each other's emotions. Yeah, and they're all getting ingrained, not just in our mind, not just in our emotion, but in the body as well. If you go deeper into body work, you'll find all of these entangled in different parts of the body. Now, when this starts occurring, what actually occurs is there is a light inside, but there is all kinds of blanket that are being thrown without awareness, without consciousness, and they just put it in a haphazard manner. Like if you enter a room and there are 5 different, curtains of different colors and they're just thrown around, you just get a very different effect. From vis-a-vis another room you enter, and somebody has consciously created a center. Somebody has consciously, put things around in a way that it is aligned to the center. You get something, you get an effect, you get an ambience. Same is true with a temple building. When you're building a temple, it's a very sacred process where you're consecrating a deity, an idol, making it the center. And you're building everything else around it, to tune into it. It is the same way that we need to do, to discover the core and honor the core. Okay. So the problem is, like, so for example, there was in my extended family network, there was a young couple, and they were two wonderful human beings, but often there was some conflict that was going on. It was okay, but when the child was born and the child was growing about 2 or 3 or 4 years of age, I started, whenever I met them, I started observing that exactly the negative mannerisms of both of them, the child was displaying. So I pointed out and said, like mannerisms like anger, mannerisms like tonality. So I pointed by saying, hey guys, you just have to be a little bit more aware because this is going lock, stock, and barrel into the child. Okay. Now, so the first thing to be careful is the child at all getting an opportunity to reflect or to be in spaces that are conducive to this? So, for example, in a classroom, which is done very mechanically, vis-a-vis a classroom where the teacher has taken 5 minutes of effort to come before the class, arranged what they call a urli, or that small, bowl, put a flower decoration there, and put that as a center there, would have a profound impact on the children, even unconsciously, because the teacher is saying some centering is important. Something needs to be centered. So I want to bring some beauty. I want to put something there. Okay. Or the teacher is coming and let us say today, people do all these PowerPoints and stuff like that. The teacher is just making an effort to center something, highlight something. So the aspect of discovery of core is the aspect of centering, finding the center and aligning the other things to that center. So this will occur by itself either through reflection, that is what happened for me, or the ambience is built in some manner by the adults or the caretakers. So there are, or let us say in the room and the walls, there are certain colors that are used in a conscious manner. There is an ambience of centering, balancing. Now, the chances that then in such a case, the child also gets that method unconsciously inside is higher. Okay. So the first point, I'll go point by point. The first point is the common problem, both for a child and us, is we're absorbing all the time. And we don't process it out. Process it out simply means what is useful is retained, what is not useful is released. We don't know how to do it at our body, in our mind, in our emotion level. or we can learn to do it, which is what integral yoga is all about. Mother Sri Aurobindo, many other people have described these things. So in the child, watch out if there is even a little bit of a breather we are giving to the child, so that there can be a space of reflection, so that the child even unconsciously understands centering. Now, for me, I'll give you an example. I did not have any of that. My father was very conscious. He was in HR, he was very conscious. So he was always looking at how to develop the child very well. But I wouldn't say necessarily that what I shared was there. But what happened unknowingly was, from my third standard, I started playing violin. Okay. And I started playing violin extremely reluctantly with no interest. I had zero interest in playing violin. I merely went because my parents said that I should learn, and because my sister was learning vocal Carnatic music, so I had to be the companion. So because I have to wait, they put me into the violin class. So from 3rd to 10th standard, for 7 years, I learned violin with no interest. But there was this habit that I always had, that even from that time, whatever I do, I should do it well. So I used to practice the violin. Every day for 15 minutes or 20 minutes in a very bored manner, I used to practice the violin. But when you practice the violin, there is always centering. After the 2nd or 3rd class, they teach you to adjust the shruti. The 4 strings, the sound has to be balanced. So, and violin itself is they say it's the king of instruments. There's something about the music that happens and transforms a little bit of your nerves. So for me, somewhat the aspect of centering, somewhat the aspect of balance, somewhat like when you play, there is always a center. They say that the singer is the center now in a fusion, or they say the musician is the center now. So those things were forming in my unconscious in a way. That this is one of the aspects of the core. What is the center with which you're going to define yourself, with which you're going to look at yourself? Are you going to look at yourself by your name? Are you going to look at yourself by your religion? Are you going to look at yourself by your marks? All this is important. But yet, is there something? So the core is evolving. This is the important thing. The core has an infinite potential to evolve. The core can be an intent, aspiration, or it can be a quality or a value, or it can be a nature or a gift that we are carrying. Some of this is the core. So I'll pause here. Any doubt? So instead of constantly just absorbing, there is some kind of a centering and balance which the adults are weaving in the background of the child going up, which will help the child to also recognize the method unconsciously. So I'll pause here. I'll take Leena's question in a moment, which is not necessarily on what I'm speaking. First, is there any question on what I've shared so far? It's good to interact, so maybe something is clear, not clear.
When a child enters that age around 18, 20, when the process of individuation sort of is suspended or put in cold storage because of peer pressure, societal pressure, academics, and sexuality, and so on, which you talked about. Is it that it is just being concealed, or does it sort of really regress? Because it will emerge later, isn't it?
Yeah, it will emerge later. So if it is there, it will emerge later. See, the kind of, so I'm all sharing from observed data. Some of the people have not grown up yet. So, they are still, college and post-college at this point of time. There are some people who seem to have lost it sufficiently lost it, which means there was something that was there and the connection is kind of gone very weak. Okay, now, if the person continues to do that, then it could occur at a much later period. It could occur at 30, 35, 40, when the aspects of the other things are explored and one starts hearing that, the deeper voice. That's one possibility. But the other times where I'm seeing that what is being dropped can be reasonably arrested or brought back into focus is around an adult who's slightly conscious. The adult can be an uncle, the adult can be a guide. If somebody is able to just keep pointing out, hey, you have this, and bring them ways of how to integrate it into their basic aspects of their life and work, then it is better. So it is not lost, but I think I've been seeing both phenomena where it is lost for such long periods of time where I feel it's a loss. See, you can go through all aspects of your life, including desire, including attraction, including infatuation, all of that stuff. But if you do it with this, then there is a slight chance that there is the accelerated evolution can be a little bit better. But I think the story plays both ways, and I think it is it differs from person to person, at least from what I've observed.
So we have a question in the chat.
Yeah, I'll pick both. I can read. I'll pick Vaibhav's first, and then I'll go to Leena. Can you please share how teacher-parent can work out for the nurturing, such as child knows what to select and not to absorb? Is centering, is that one thing? So see, for the teacher and parent, so here are some ways where I've done this, and I'll share it with examples. So there was a student who had come to my class, and he was in the 7th standard. His parent told me that this boy is completely distracted, no concentration, not studying well. We are not able to manage him, so why don't you help him? That mother was known to me. So the boy came, and all that the mother said was true in one way. So we have a 3-hour class with a long break. He couldn't sit even for 2 minutes. He'll walk around, he'll come behind me. But this is very important for the teacher or the parent. They have to observe. They have to observe beyond the plus and minus with curiosity. See, I'm basically a researcher, to be honest with you. I like to find out. So I was watching this boy when this guy gets centered. So I was watching the opposite. He's distracted most of the time. At what point this guy is centered, concentrated, and interested in something? This was all my quest. So as he walked around in the hall, in my first book, there is a diagram of some diamonds. Okay, so this boy looked at it and he said, "Uncle, how many diamonds are there?" Now, the question I knew was not just coming from a random thing, but there was an interest. So I said, "Why don't you count?" Now he counted it. In the meanwhile, class is going on. We're exploring something. He counted, he walked around. I noticed as he was walking around, he was interested in the shapes and the figures and the numbers. And he was walking on the tiles and all that. And later on, as he was doing all this, I finished a portion and I started asking some questions to the students. After a while, this guy answered all the questions correctly. But apparently, he seemed very distracted. He was not in his place. That's when I got a clue that something in him is attracted to art, geometry, maths, and numbers. I called his mom after 2 weeks of observation and told her, "Mom, just put him into something as any of this." Mother put him. And after a couple of years, this boy is I have publicly interviewed him in LinkedIn. There's this interview that I did about 2 years back. Me, this boy, his name is Sasta, and his mother and dad, we did a LinkedIn live with him as the core thing. And this boy is now a very different person, does origami, reasonably good marks, plays piano very well, plays cricket very well, and he sends me some texts as how he's able to explore intuition, through cricket, through piano. All came because we allowed his deeper interest to be explored. The rest of the things opened up. Now, I'm not saying for saying sake, but I've given a gift to this boy because I observed it. I observed it behind what the so-called irritable nature that he had. I'll be doing something, he'll come and sit behind my back. His back will come and touch my back and all that stuff. But since I allowed it instead of curbing it, in the meanwhile, I managed the class reasonably well, telling him that now you're getting too much distraction. I'm not able to manage, come and sit down. Through all that, we just detected what he was resonating to. Resonance. Okay. Resonance is one of the best ways that you will detect the core. Now, as a teacher, don't burden yourself that you have to detect it for 40 people. No. Let it be an organic process. Whoever you detect, great. Whoever you don't detect, totally great. Just be in that posture. If you observe, feed it back. Feed it back. Okay. So resonance at a form and essence level. So he was interested in this thing. Essence, I went to the essence of it. So it appears art, so it appears beauty, it appears numbers, it appears geometry. From a form, from one detail, I guessed what could be the core essences, fed it to the mom. This is the best way to detect the core. Watch for the resonance or disappointment. Both are the same. And look behind it. What is the person interested in? What is the person disappointed about? Then you would get a deeper, operation. Feed it. It has to be fed. Like the other day, some time back, I was in Matra Mandir, a week back. Matra Mandir is in Auroville. And I was with a guide and I was part of a workshop. And the facilitator, we were exploring mother's qualities. The facilitator was just talking about a gardener who's come and flowers that normally don't bloom are blooming. And immediately there was another girl beside. She said, yes, I really know this flower, which is called some divine something or whatever, cannot grow in this climate. It is flowering. And then, the facilitator went on to explain that from the time this guy has come, flowers are blooming. And also flowers that are not supposed to bloom are blooming. And as she was speaking, this man walks up. He was just walking around Matar Mandir, in a joyful manner. And then, they said a hi. And then the facilitator shared that what he actually told her was, he will go around the garden in Matar Mandir. And he said that the plants were talking to him and saying, feed me, feed me. And he fed the plants. He fed them cow dung. That was one of the main things. So he got a group of volunteers walking around Auroville. You get a lot of cows there, collect the cow dung, feed the manure. I have a garden in my office and I have seen when you give cow dung and proper manure, it flowers. All he did was feed. The same thing is true for the core. Discovery, many people break their head to discover the core. But I'm trying to tell you that if you just relax and observe, you will obviously see the core because it is always calling behind a plus or a minus. Very important is to feed it. It has to be fed. I can give you many more examples, but in this particular case, it was fed. Since it was fed, the inner flowering occurs. There is something that gets established in a child. The core gets somewhat strengthened, and then it'll show up, work what to do in life, what to do, and all that stuff. So discover through resonance or dissonance. But whatever you discover, feed it to the child or whoever is appropriate. But it has to be fed in either the form or the essence so that the core gets flowering. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And it is a gardening process in life that we need to be very interested in. I'll take Leena's question, but before that, is there any question or doubt on what I shared just now? Okay. I'll take Leena's question, which is slightly not exactly what I'm doing, but I will take that and then I'll take maybe one more example and it'll bring us to the close of the hour. How to make universe work for my wish? Well, why not, Leela, you work for what is the wish of the... So when you say universe, there are different aspects of the universe, I sometimes as a hobby, I flip through my Instagram. Yesterday, there was this very handsome looking man who was putting an advertisement, You want the universe to, respond to you. You really want, you feel what you want, you talk to the universe, and the universe for sure is going to give you. It is true. Okay. But watch out, because the universe is also intelligent. Okay, there's an aspect of the universe, which is connected to the divine, which is also intelligent. If the universe gives all that you're asking, the world will be a mess, because we operate out of multiple parts of us. So there is an intelligence that is at play also. Okay, so I would answer your question in two ways, which I told you the example of what this man had shared. If you want the universe to work for you, then be very clear and feel it inside you and ask for support. It'll come. There's no doubt about it. But please remember, there's another aspect to it. Can you become humble enough to work for your own higher self, to work for, let us say, the universal aspect of the divine or the universe, which has a much greater knowledge? So can you listen to, what should I do? Instead of saying, I want this, what should I want? And as the intuition comes, hold that light, hold that clarity, is a complementary posture. I think both has to go together. Otherwise, it would just be something that is born out of a passing desire, and you get caught into it and miss something, deeper, or the core that you're supposed to fulfill. So yeah, so that's my response to that. Okay. Any other questions before I share maybe a few more things to round up? Okay. Now,
So, Arul, I have a question.
Yes, please. Yes, that'll be nice to take questions. Yes.
So when we discussed about when searching or probably helping a small child look for the core. So if we talk, same thing about teenagers. So, I mean, any observation, because, when it comes to the teen, at that particular age, already, many things have started, because, they want to be more presentable. They want to think some other way. Their lifestyle has changed. And at the same time, desires and external influences have also taken over them. And sometimes they are able to see it, and sometimes they are, not able to reflect on it and see it. But at the same time, many teenagers, they do also, to feel to have, to be lost, right? Because sometimes they're not able to share it with their parents, or probably even talk with them, or even, have a handful of person or friends probably who are elder to them, whom they can discuss with and understand the situation. But so when it comes to this side, so anything or any observation which you had when it comes to for those people looking at the core?
I think two observations. One is perhaps at that point it is easier detected by looking at their natural gifts and talents, because see, the core is going to shine through almost anything. So as a teenager, I think whether they're aware or not, it's also the time where they're interested in something. It could just be a hobby. It could just be photography. It could be music or something. While they may be pursuing it in a pure form or a mixed form, that's completely different. But what exactly is their skill or talent? Okay. Now, so for example, there's a student who I am personally grooming. So this person meets me almost every week for 1 or 2 hours. Now, when this person turned a teenager, okay, and there was certain loss that was occurring in the talents that the person had. In this case, we found the talent before, and there was a certain loss that was occurring. So now, what was the talent of this person? This person is very intuitive, can draw very well. You have something that you're describing, the person halfway through can direct what you're saying and draw that. This is the talent, for example. So you need to have concentration and connection to be able to do that. So when the person started moving into teenage, some of the things were getting lost because the person was not able to actually connect the way the person was connecting earlier. Okay. So now there are two aspects here. With a teenager, I think go for what their talents are. It's easier. And behind the talent, see what is it that is resonant to them about this particular talent. It can be photography, it could be writing. Half of it could be about, presenting themselves in a better manner, or it could just be a fad. But if there is something that is touching them, there will be a talent. Now, the talent can be developed through their own true nature only. It is through a particular nature of theirs. So if you take the talent and just engage with them a little bit as to how they will take it or into its next level, then slowly you will start observing in what conditions the talent comes best. In what conditions that talent comes out in a flat tone. The talent always is not a constant. Sometimes they're just shining suddenly, that they're really able to express their photography, drawing, or maybe automobile designing or whatsoever. Find out in what context or what states they're able to do it. You're getting clues on that core. Now that has to be developed. But there is another problem I'm seeing in teenagers, or it could be teenagers or it could be others. Too much emphasis on oneself. Too much emphasis on, here's my preference, I'm a millennial, and my ideas are great and all that stuff, which after a point is just merely self-praise or over self-emphasis. So the problem for that is I help them to understand the universality of these things, which means while we talk about individuation, an over-celebration of self misses the understanding, because individuation has two components. One is something that is forming in me, which is always connected to a universal aspect. If it is intuition, there is a universal intuition. If it is creativity, it is not so much about just the individual. The person has to open to the fullness of the creativity or the intuition, so to say. So there is one way I solve the problem, not too effectively, because in the peer groups, they often talk about self, voicing themselves. They also talk about, my emotion, I have to express it, giving space for self. All these jargons have now entered the so-called the new age, which is good, but it has weak points also. So the thing that helps me to get them out of that trap is, connect to it, but do understand that there are universal aspects. So you have to learn to connect within you, but you also have to be able to connect it on the outside. Then it becomes a little bit more neutral. Okay. There's another question. Children of primary school level imitates quite other than character seen in books, movie. Can that be taken as clue towards? Yes, exactly. So when a child is imitating, watch for what is it the child is trying to imitate about. I give you a clue. So for example, the child is imitating somebody who's angry, or somebody, or a hero or a heroine, who often comes in fights and, destroys and all that stuff. So do understand that the core that is inside, in the beginning, would not come in a pure form. So for example, if one of the aspects of core is power, for example, the aspect of power, it's one quality of the core. But on the surface, it could come as intense emotions, or the child may be imitating people who are heroes or stuff like that. So there's a certain common thread that you're also starting to see. The child is imitating. Watch what the child is imitating, catch it, feed it back, but request the child to go into the purest and the highest aspect of it. So the child is imitating, let's say, people who are slaying, fighting, is interested in that kind of stuff. Then you start exposing the child into the best of that. Remember this one thing, the core has to be fed. If it is not fed rightly, for example, the plants, if they are fed with not rich manure, just some kind of a soil, just some kind of water thrown at different points of time, they're not getting the right feeding. So their blooming also is not going to be that great. So now you see that they're imitating feedback stories of valor, bravery, where bravery is balanced with beauty, bravery is balanced with wisdom. It can be through music. There are drum beats, which bring that fervor, but it has balance also. There could be cartoon characteristics, where they hold that different poise. So when you feed that back through the channel that is already open, then, but the adult has to be very careful. We're not pushing it in. We are feeding it back or giving them an ambience. And if it is right, the soul of the child or the core of the child is going to latch on to it. But if we push it, as like, I'm a teacher and maybe you should do it, then you would have lost that sensitivity and connection of listening. We are observing very carefully. Is it clicking? Is it helping the child? Is something deeper getting formed? Is there a blooming happening? It is that language of, detecting constantly is something that will help you there. Okay, I think we are at the hour. Anything?
If anyone has any question, please go ahead, either put in the chat or you can unmute and also ask.
A person who never really loses touch with his core, is it possible that the way he perceives the core or the way he would like to express it in his outer life, can it evolve as he grows up? That can also change, is it?
Yes, it has been in my case. My core, as I discovered 27 years back, was exploring that point where spirituality meets material excellence. And this was clear right in my 4th year of college. I discovered it by doing just some simple practices. So I knew that this fusion point was a part of my core. It is the same that I've been pursuing for 27 years, but what spirituality is, what material excellence is, has evolved. I never picked body work at all. In the last 4 years, the fusion point has come to include deep body work. And as I do deep body work, I suddenly find I'm able to do my consulting work far better because the mind is far more clearer suddenly. So if you have hit the spot correct, it has to be fed. And a part of it also, it evolves, becomes richer, sharper, wider. It definitely happens as far as I understand. Okay, with that, thank you, everybody.
Any other questions?
Hello.
Hi.
Am I audible?
Yeah, Preeti.
Yeah, so sorry, I joined the session a bit late. My apologies for that. I'm going to see it again. For the last 15-20 minutes, what I heard is something which has really interested me. So I'll just ask this question that, do you take adults or adult children to help them identify with their core virtually? Would you be able to help that? Have you ever done that, sir?
I do that. It's not that I don't do that, but I do it as a very organic process, which means that there are enough opportunities I give in terms of doing certain public or open or even free courses for people to engage. If it is something naturally that is coming as a calling, then I take it forward. So I don't generally get into, okay, so there's this child, can you go and find the code? Purely because of my time commitments. There's nothing else but that. But I do it. But like, I'll give you an example, there was this mother who spoke about her child and fixed up a Zoom call. Okay, and so I fixed a Zoom call and I was extraordinarily busy. I fixed a Zoom call and I was so busy that I did not take it on the computer, but this time I took it on the phone. In the 5th minute, I told her I'm going to meet her the next day. In 30 minutes, I booked a flight, and the next day I was flying to Bangalore just to meet that girl because she had something on her core. And I met her at the right time. This was just before the teen was breaking. So still that freshness was there. I spent an entire day with the child, okay, with the permission of the mother, of course. and gave certain clues. And I know that I'm still in touch with the child. There was a discovery that occurred. So I'm not saying yes, I'm not saying no. If it is meant to be, yes, but I do have a lot of people that I've trained in my network who can do this as well. So yes and no, it depends on if there is a calling, yes, absolutely yes. Which
So
means if
great.
there's
How
a
can we
calling
reach
from the
you?
child,
Yes. Okay.
not necessarily from the adult. Yeah.
Yes. So how can we reach you, sir? Some email ID or some contact number?
I'll put my number down. WhatsApp is the easiest for me.
Yes. Okay.
I put my number. I'm also in Insta, Facebook, and all that. Yeah. I put my number on the chat. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Arul. This has been one of those rather rare sessions in which you promised that you will pause and make it more of a dialogue than just a straight talk. And you did create so many opportunities at all the opportune moments. You kept pausing after every block before turning to before a new movement started in the thought process. Thank you for a very interactive session.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Hope to have you again.
Pleasure.
I'll request Amit to say more, whatever he feels, and then finally wind up the session.
Yeah. Thank you, Arul, for a very interesting and interactive, session today.
Thank you.
And I really thank everyone for joining today evening. So we'll end with a moment of silence. And thanks everyone once again.